Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Incubator Podcast. We are live at Hot Topics in Neonatology, and our last guest for today is none other than one of the giants of our field, right. Dr. Eduardo Bancalari. Dr. Bancalari, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We've had the pleasure of having you on already once. I will refer people to that 1 hour long conversation if they want to have more pearls from your years of experience. But thank you for coming back to the show.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And that was episode 93.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Was 93? No.
Not 1993, but episode 93.
93. I thought that 93. No.
Okay. Dr. Bancalari, you had a very interesting session today. You gave the Gerald Lucy keynote address on BPD after 50 years. Have we made progress? I hope you're going to tell our listeners that yes, we've made progress.
Well,
oh no.
Yes, I think we have made progress, but it's not the progress that we had envisioned many years ago. And there are many explanations for that we can go into in a few minutes. But unfortunately, the incidence of BPD in most of the reports from the US and in England and in Australia, they show that the incidence of BPD is stable or even increasing in some of these numbers. So it's obviously very discouraging, especially for somebody like me who has spent almost my entire career trying to improve respiratory outcome in premature infants. To see this is disappointing. But again, I am doubtful of the validity of some of the numbers because first the population has changed
dramatically.
So we are talking about 21, 22 weekers now. So it's a completely different situation than a 28 or 30 weeker that we were talking about 20 or 30 years ago.
Absolutely.
So the challenge is there. But the point is that even if you correct for gestational age, it seems that the incidence is going up. So if you adjust and you just take 26 weekers or 24 weekers, and you see the curves of the last publication just a few weeks ago from the Vermont Oxford, it looks like it's going up.
Yeah.
Slowly, but going up. So the other explanation, I think, is that you are aware of all the discussions about the definition of BPD that I think we're wasting way too much time discussing that.
That's right.
Yes, but I think that obviously the definitions have limitations, and one of the limitations is that we are defining the disease by the administration of oxygen, when it really should be by the need of oxygen. Okay, what I mean is that we are giving oxygen to babies that probably don't need it. And therefore, we're calling them BPD. And this is mainly an issue, as I mentioned during the talk, with these famous high-flow nasal cannulas. Because essentially what happens with those cannulas is that we don't know how much pressure we're giving. We don't have any idea how much oxygen the baby is really getting, unless we're using very high flows. So we are essentially calling a baby BPD when he's getting maybe 1 liter or 0.5 liter of 25% oxygen. That baby doesn't need oxygen, doesn't need supplemental oxygen. So I think that there is a lot of that. And I showed this morning in the talk, I read one paper many years ago linking the increased use of high flow with BPD, and I really didn't pay much attention. I said, well, this is just a study, two different epochs, many other things change and this and that. But then, as you, I don't know if you were in the lecture, but a few years later, a very similar paper from Ireland showing exactly the same thing. And not only higher BPD, but higher ROP. And now I showed this other paper from Chile, from somebody, clinical investigator I really respect a lot. Exactly the same thing. More BPD, more ROP. So I think that it's a combination. On one side, we are calling BPD babies that really are not requiring a lot of oxygen. But my concern is that because the high flow nasal cannula is such a simple, gentle way of giving pressure and oxygen, we're overusing it. I don't think that people are not, if you have a baby on nasal CPAP, the mother, the nurse, everybody wants to see that baby quickly out of the cannulas.
Yeah.
With these little flow cannulas, it doesn't seem to bother. The baby can feed, can do everything. So I think that they are really getting more oxygen, and that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Calling it or not calling BPD doesn't matter. The important thing is what the baby has, not what we called. But giving oxygen when the baby doesn't need the oxygen and inducing ROP, that's very serious. So I think it's something that has to be looked at.
Yeah, and something that we discussed briefly with Dr. Cindy McAvoy this morning, where might be better off just giving CPAP a little bit longer then, and know what you're doing, know what you're giving, and not having this sort of black box of, well, I'm not sure how much is actually being delivered to the baby at the current time. So something that obviously makes a lot of sense. What is your perspective now? I know you do a lot of work on trying to gather more data from in a continuous fashion from the ventilator and trying to understand the babies before we reach the point of BPD diagnosis about who they are physiologically. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, we have, I don't know if you are referring to that, but we have been funded by NHLBI for the last 6 or 7 years for this study, pre-vent and now post-vent, where we are not adding any monitoring. We are just taking all the signals from the monitor 24 hours uninterrupted of all the vital signs, essentially, including saturations. And so we have 700 patients from 4 or 5 different centers, and a huge amount of data, and we have learned a lot. And in terms of subtle things that we probably miss when you are just relying on what the nurse is telling you or what you see in the medical record, where you are
the 10 minutes you spend on
Exactly.
rounds
That's
at the
right.
bedside of the patient.
That's my point, exactly. Here we have continuous recording as long as the babies were on oxygen. So we have learned a lot, and yes, there is a lot of normative data that we have now that we didn't have before, and I think that we understand a little bit better the instability of the respiratory system in these kids. And I think that this also relates to BPD, because the fact, or the possible increase in BPD, because the fact that we are monitoring these babies closer and we have all this data allows us to identify episodes of hypoxemia, for example, for which many times we give oxygen during the episode. That is perfectly okay, but unfortunately we don't discontinue immediately after the episode. And yeah, unless you have a continuous recording and you can see all that data, you miss it. You don't realize what's happening, especially if it's happening during nights.
Absolutely.
The night is a very different...
completely different picture from days, yes.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, it's a very important study. There are several publications already out, and there will be many more coming. The nice thing is that now we are on post-vent, where we are following all these kids, where we have all this very rich information, and we are evaluating all the data then to see what's the implications longer term.
Very interesting.
That's exciting. You said something when we first started that you weren't, when you started your career to now, you're not where we expected to be. And I've always wondered what neonatology will look like, in 20 to 30 years for us. What did you expect it to look like when you started your career, when you got to 2024, 2025?
Yeah. Well, I think essentially we felt, or we thought wrongly, that these limits of viability were fixed.
Was stable, yeah.
So when I came to Jackson, the unit where you trained, and there was a clear rule there: no baby under 28 weeks or under 1 kilo should be intubated. None, not to protect the lung, because we knew that they were not going to. It was a different reason.
Yeah.
So the babies essentially were not supported, and now, well, every 4 or 5 years we keep moving from 28, then it was 26, then was 24, now it's 22, and they're talking about 21. So I have been fooled too many times to predict what is going to happen in the future. I think that there must be really a biological limit where it's going to be pretty nasty if we try to do things but I may be wrong, and it may happen. The last picture in my presentation was a couple of fetal lumps.
The bio bags.
In the bio bag.
Yeah.
So if that comes out to be a solution for some patients, then who knows how far you can go.
Yeah.
Now, do I feel that is the right thing to do? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a very different question. We'll see. We'll see what the future will tell.
Yeah.
Dr. Bancalari, thank you so much for dropping by and sharing these pieces of wisdom with us.
Very welcome.
Always
A pleasure
like
to be back.
on.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very good.